Summer in Algiers, to Jacques Heurgon. They are often secret, the love affairs we have with cities. Old towns like Paris, Prague, and even Florence are closed in upon themselves in such a way as to delimit their domain. But Algiers and a few other privileged coastal towns open into the sky like a mouth or a wound. What one can fall in love with in Algiers is what everybody lives with. The sea, visible from every corner, a certain heaviness of the sunlight, the beauty of the people. And, as usual, such generosity and lack of shame emit a more secret perfume. In Paris, one can yearn for space and for the beating of wings. Here, at least, man has everything he needs, and his desires, thus assured, can take the measure of his riches. One probably has to live a long time in Algiers to understand how desiccating an excess of nature's blessings can be. There is nothing here for people seeking knowledge, education, or self-improvement. The land contains no lessons. It neither promises nor reveals anything. It is content to give, but does so profusely. Everything here can be seen with the naked eye, and is known the very moment it is enjoyed. The pleasures have no remedies, and their joys remain without hope. What the land needs are clear-sighted souls, that is to say, those without consolation. It asks that we make an act of lucidity, as one makes an act of faith. A strange country, which gives the men it nourishes both their splendor and their misery. It is not surprising that the sensual riches this country offers so profusely to the sensitive person should coincide with the most extreme deprivation. There is no truth that does not also carry bitterness. Why then should it be surprising if I never love the face of this country more than in the midst of its poorest inhabitants? Throughout their youth, men find a life here that matches their beauty. Decline and forgetfulness come later. They have wagered on the flesh, knowing they would lose. In Algiers, to the young and vital, everything is a refuge and a pretext for rejoicing. The bay, the sun, games on the red and white terraces overlooking the sea, the flowers and stadiums, the cool-limbed girls. But for the man who has lost his youth, there is nothing to hang on to, and no outlet for melancholy. Elsewhere, on Italian terraces, in European cloisters, or in the shape of the hills in Provence, there are places where a man can shed his humanity and gently find salvation from himself. But everything here demands solitude and young blood. On his deathbed, Goethe called for light, and this is a historic remark. In Bellecourt and Bab el-Oued, old men sitting at the back of cafes listen to the young with brilliantined hair boasting of their exploits. It is summer in Algiers that grants us these beginnings and these endings. During the summer months, the town is deserted, but the poor and the sky remain. We go down with them to the harbor and its treasures, the water's gentle warmth and the women's brown bodies. In the evening, swollen with these riches, the people return to oilcloth and kerosene lamp, the meager furniture of their existence. In Algiers, you don't talk about going swimming, but about knocking off a swim. I won't insist. People swim in the harbor and then go rest on the buoys. When you pass a buoy where a pretty girl is sitting, you shout to your friends, "I tell you, it's a seagull." These are healthy pleasures. They certainly seem ideal to the young men, since most of them continue this life during the winter, stripping down for a frugal lunch in the sun at noontime, every day. Not that they have read the boring sermons of our nudists, those Protestants of the body. There is a way of systematizing the body that is as exasperating as systems for the soul. They just like being in the sun. It would be hard to exaggerate the significance of this custom in our day. For the first time in 2,000 years, the body has been shown naked on the beaches. For 20 centuries, men have strived to impose decency on the insolence and simplicity of the Greeks, to diminish the flesh and elaborate our dress. Today, reaching back over this history, young men sprinting on the Mediterranean beaches are rediscovering the magnificent motion of the athletes of Delos. Living so close to other bodies and through one's own body, one finds it has its own nuances, its own life, and to venture an absurdity, its own psychology. The evolution of the body, like that of the mind, has its history, its reversals, its gains, and its losses. With only this nuance, color. Swimming in the harbor in the summertime, you notice that everybody's skin changes at the same time, from white to gold, then to brown, and at last to a tobacco hue, the final stage the body can attain in its quest for transformation. Overlooking the harbor is a pattern of white cubes, the Kasbah. From water level, people's bodies form a bronzed frieze against the glaring white background of the Arab town. And as one moves into August and the sun grows stronger, the white of the houses grows more blinding, and the skins take on a darker glow. How then can one keep from feeling a part of this dialogue between stone and flesh, keeping pace with the sun and the seasons? One spends whole mornings diving to peals of laughter and splashing water, on long canoe trips paddling around the red and black freighters. The Norwegian ones smell of all sorts of wood. The German ones reek of oil. The ones going from port to port along the coast smell of wine and old casks. At the hour when the sun spills from every corner of the sky, an orange canoe laden with brown bodies carries us home in one mad sprint. And when, suddenly ceasing the rhythmic stroking of its double fruit-colored wings, we glide into the quiet inner harbor, how can I doubt that what I lead across the silken waters is a cargo of tawny gods in whom I recognize my brothers? At the other end of town, summer already offers us the contrast of its other wealth. I mean its silences and boredom. These silences do not always have the same quality depending on whether they occur in shadow or sunlight. There is a noontime silence on the government square. In the shade of the trees that grow along each side, Arabs sell penny glasses of iced lemonade, perfumed with orange blossom. Their cry of "cool, cool" echoes across the empty square. When it fades away, silence falls again under the sun. Ice moves in the merchant's pitcher, and I can hear it tinkling. There's a siesta silence. On the streets around the docks, in front of the squalid barber shops, one can measure it in the melodious buzzing of the flies behind the hollow reed curtains. Elsewhere in the Moorish cafes of the Kasbah, it is bodies that are silent, that cannot drag themselves away, leave the glass of tea, and rediscover time in the beating of their pulse. But above all, there is the silence of the summer evenings. These brief moments when day trembles into night must swarm with secret signs and calls, to be so closely linked to Algiers in my heart. When I have been away from this country for some time, I think of its twilights as promises of happiness. On the hills, looking down over the town, there are paths among the mastic and the olive trees, and it is toward them that my heart turns then. I can see sheaves of black birds rising against the green horizon. In the sky, suddenly emptied of its sun, something releases its hold. A whole flock of tiny red clouds stretches upward until it dissolves into the air. Almost immediately afterward appears the first star, which had been taking shape and growing harder in the thickness of the heavens. And then, sudden and all-enveloping, the night. What is so unique in these fleeting evenings of Algiers that they free so many things in me? They leave a sweetness on my lips that vanishes into the night before I have time to weary of it. Is this the secret of their persistence? The tenderness of this country is overwhelming and furtive, but at least our heart gives way to it completely. The dance hall at Padavani Beach is open every day, and, in this immense rectangular box, open to the sea all along one side, the poor youngsters of the district come to dance until evening. Often, I would wait there for one particular moment. In the daytime, the dance hall is protected by a sloping wooden roof. When the sun has gone down, it is removed. The hall fills with a strange green light, born in the double shell of sky and sea. When you sit far from the windows, you can see only the sky, and, like puppets in a shadow theater, the faces of the dancers floating past one after another. Sometimes they play a waltz, and the dark profiles revolve like cut-out figures on a turntable. Night comes quickly, and with it, the lights. I shall never be able to describe the thrill and the secret enchantment of this subtle moment. I remember a magnificent tall girl who had danced all one afternoon. She was wearing a necklace of jasmine on her close-fitting blue dress, which was damp with sweat right down the back. She was laughing and throwing back her head as she danced. Passing in front of the tables, she left behind a mingled scent of flowers and flesh. When evening came, I could no longer see her body pressed against her partner, but the white of her jasmine and the black of her hair swirled one after the other against the sky. And when she threw back her breasts, I could hear her laugh and see her partner's silhouette lean suddenly forward. I owe my idea of innocence to evenings like these, and I am learning not to separate these beings, charged with violence, from the sky in which their desires revolve. At the neighborhood movie houses in Algiers, they sometimes sell pastilles with engraved red mottos that express everything needed for the birth of love. A. Questions. When will you marry me? Do you love me? B. Replies, madly, next spring. After having prepared the ground, you pass them to the girl next to you, who answers in kind or simply plays dumb. At Bellecourt, there have been marriages arranged like this. Whole lives decided in an exchange of mint candies, and this gives a good picture of the childlike people of this country. The hallmark of youth, perhaps, is a magnificent vocation for easy pleasures. But above all, the haste to live borders on extravagance. In Bellecourt, as in Bab el-Oued, people marry young. They start work very early and exhaust the range of human experience in 10 short years. A working man of 30 has already played all his cards. He waits for the end with his wife and children around him. His delights have been swift and merciless. So has his life. And you understand, then, that he is born in a land where everything is given to be taken away. In such abundance and profusion, life follows the curve of the great passions, sudden, demanding, generous. It is not meant to be built, but to be burned up. So reflection or self-improvement are quite irrelevant. The notion of hell, for example, is nothing more than an amusing joke here. Only the very virtuous are allowed such fancies. And I even think that virtue is a meaningless word in Algeria. Not that these men lack principles. They have their code of morality, which is very well defined. You don't let your mother down. You see to it that your wife is respected in the street. You show consideration to pregnant women. You don't attack an enemy 2-to-1 because that's dirty. If anyone fails to observe these elementary rules, he's not a man, and that's all there is to it. This seems to me just and strong. There are still many of us who observe the highway code, the only disinterested one I know. But at the same time, shopkeeper morality is unknown. I have always seen the faces around me take on an expression of pity at the sight of a man between two policemen. And, before finding out whether the man was a thief, a parasite, or simply an eccentric, people said, "Poor fellow," or again with a touch of admiration, "He's a real pirate, that one." There are peoples born for pride and for life. It is they who nourish the most singular vocation for boredom, they too who find death the most repulsive. Apart from sensual delights, Algerian amusements are idiotic. A bowling club, fraternal society dinners, cheap movies and communal celebrations have for years now been enough to keep the over 30 age group entertained. Sundays in Algiers are among the dreariest anywhere. How would these mindless people know how to disguise the deep horror of their lives with myths? In Algiers, everything associated with death is either ridiculous or detestable. The people have neither religion nor idols, and die alone after having lived in a crowd. I know no place more hideous than the cemetery on the Boulevard Bru, which is opposite one of the most beautiful landscapes in the world. A fearful sadness rises from the accumulated bad taste of its black monuments, revealing death's true face. "Everything passes," the heart-shaped ex-votos read, "but memory. And they all insist on the ridiculous eternity provided at so small a price by the hearts of those who loved us." The same phrases serve all forms of despair. They are addressed to the deceased and speak in the second person singular. "Our memory will never abandon thee." A gloomy pretense by means of which one lends a body and desires to what is, at best, a black liquid. In another spot, in the midst of a stupefying display of flowers and marble birds, is this reckless vow, "Never shall thy grave lack flowers." But one is quickly reassured. The words are carved around a gilded stucco bouquet, a great time-saver for the living, like those flowers called everlasting, which owe their pompous name to the gratitude of those who still jump on moving buses. Since one must move with the times, the classical warbler is sometimes replaced by a breathtaking pearly airplane, piloted by a silly-looking angel who, disregarding all logic, has been provided with a magnificent pair of wings. Still, how can I explain it? These images of death never quite separate themselves from life. The values are closely linked. The favorite joke of Algerian undertakers driving by in an empty hearse is to shout, "Like a ride, honey?" to the pretty girls they meet along the way. There's nothing to keep one from finding this symbolic, if in somewhat bad taste. It may also seem blasphemous to greet the news of someone's death with a wink of the left eye and the comment, "Poor guy, he won't sing anymore." Or, like the woman from Oran who had never loved her husband, "The Lord gave him to me. The Lord hath taken him away." But when all is said and done, I don't see what is sacred about death, and I am, on the contrary, very aware of the difference between fear and respect. Everything breathes the horror of death in this country that is an invitation to life. And yet it is beneath the walls of this very cemetery that the young men of Belcourt arrange their meetings, and the girls let themselves be kissed and fondled. I fully realize that such people cannot be accepted by everyone. Intelligence doesn't occupy the place here that it does in Italy. This race is indifferent to the mind. It worships and admires the body. From this comes its strength, its naive cynicism, and a puerile vanity that leads it to be severely criticized. People commonly reproach its mentality, that is to say, its particular mode of life and set of values. And it is true that a certain intensity of living involves some injustice. Yet here are a people with no past, with no traditions, though not without poetry. Their poetry has a hard, sensual quality I know very well, It is far from tender, even from the tenderness of the Algerian sky. It is the only poetry, in fact, that moves me and restores me. The opposite of a civilized people is a creative one. These barbarians lounging on the beaches give me the foolish hope that perhaps without knowing it, they are modeling the face of a culture where man's greatness will finally discover its true visage. These people, wholly engaged in the present, live with neither myths nor consolation. Investing all their assets on this earth, they are left defenseless against death. The gifts of physical beauty have been heaped upon them, and also the strange greediness that always goes along with wealth that has no future. Everything people do in Algiers reveals a distaste for stability and a lack of regard for the future. People are in a hurry to live, and if an art were to be born here, it would conform to the hatred of permanence that led the Dorians to carve their first column out of wood. And still, yes, one can find a certain moderation, as well as a constant excess, in the strained and violent faces of these people. In this summer sky emptied of tenderness, beneath which all truths can be told, and on which no deceitful divinity has traced the signs of hope or of redemption. Between this sky and the faces turned toward it, there is nothing on which to hang a mythology, a literature, an ethic, or a religion. Only stones, flesh, stars, and those truths the hand can touch. To feel one's ties to a land, one's love for certain men. To know there is always a place where the heart can find rest. These are already many certainties for one man's life. Doubtless they are not enough. But at certain moments everything yearns for this homeland of the soul. Yes, it is to this we must return. What is strange about finding on earth the unity Plotinus longed for? Unity expresses itself here in terms of sea and sky. The heart senses it through a certain taste of the flesh that constitutes its bitterness and greatness. I am learning that there is no superhuman happiness, no eternity outside the curve of the days. These ridiculous and essential assets, these relative truths, are the only ones that move me. I have not enough soul to understand the other, ideal ones. Not that we should behave as beasts, but I can see no point in the happiness of angels. All I know is that this sky will last longer than I shall. And what can I call eternity, except what will continue after my death? What I am expressing here is not the creature's complacency about his condition. It is something quite different. It is not always easy to be a man, even less to be a man who is pure. But to be pure means to rediscover that country of the soul where one's kinship with the world can be felt, where the throbbing of one's blood mingles with the violent pulsations of the afternoon sun. It is a well-known fact that we always recognize our homeland at the moment. We're about to lose it. Men whose self-torments are too great are those whom their native land rejects. I have no desire to be crude or to seem to exaggerate. But after all, what denies me in this life is, first of all, what kills me. Everything that exalts life at the same time increases its absurdity. In the Algerian summer, I learned that only one thing is more tragic than suffering, and that is the life of a happy man. But this can also be the path to a greater life, since it can teach us not to cheat. Many people, in fact, affect a love of life in order to avoid love itself. They try to enjoy themselves and to experiment. But this is an intellectual attitude. It takes a rare vocation to become a sensualist. A man lives out his life without the help of his mind, with its triumphs and defeats, its simultaneous loneliness and companionship. Seeing those men from Belle Court who work, take care of their wives and children, often without a word of complaint, I think that one can feel a certain shame. I certainly have no illusions. There is not much love in the lives I am describing. I should say rather that there is no longer very much, but at least they have eluded nothing. There are some words that I have never really understood, such as sin. Yet I think I know that these men have never sinned against life. For if there is a sin against life, it lies perhaps less in despairing of it than in hoping for another life and evading the implacable grandeur of the one we have. These men have not cheated. They were gods of the summer at 20 in their thirst for life, and they are still gods today, stripped of all hope. I have seen 2 of them die. They were full of horror, but silent. It is better that way. From the mass of human evils swarming in Pandora's box, the Greeks brought out hope at the very last, as the most terrible of all. I don't know any symbol more moving, for hope, contrary to popular belief, is tantamount to resignation, and to live is not to be resigned. Such, at least, is the bitter lesson of summers in Algiers. But already the season trembles and the summer passes. After so much violence and tension, the first September rains are like the first tears of a liberated land, as if, for a few days, this country were bathed in tenderness. Yet at the same time, the carob trees emit the scent of love across Algeria. In the evening or after the rain, the whole earth lies, its belly moistened with a bitter almond-scented seed, at rest from having yielded all summer long to the sun. And once again, this fragrance consecrates the nuptials of man and earth, and gives rise in us to the only truly virile love in this world, one that is generous and will die.